You may or may not be familiar with these terms. Some of them have been around a while in the realm of machine learning and artificial intelligence. Some have just been introduced in the last few years. At AWS, we've been working with these technologies for many years, applying them throughout our business to help our customers. While for many of us, the last 2 years may feel like an AI revolution, artificial intelligence has actually been around since as far back as 1943, with it being formally recognized in 1956. The advent of large language models in 2018 and foundation models in 2021 are simply the latest evolution in artificial intelligence. Today, we'll discuss how AWS is leveraging the newest artificial intelligence techniques to make software engineering more powerful and enable more builders to engage in the software development process. My name is Emil Lurch, and with me today, I have my colleague from AWS, Adnan Belwani, and Geeta Ramachandran from Finra. So let's get started. Usually when I have conversations with customers, I don't want to do it in a presentation mode like this. I want to have an actual conversation. That's hard to replicate in a venue like this, but we're going to try today. So what I'd like everybody to do, if you don't mind, is pull out your phones, grab the QR code there, or go to the URL, and put in the polling question ID. That'll give you a question, and what I'm looking for is just a general overall understanding of AI, where you're at in your journey, so that we can tailor the session a little bit toward that piece of the audience. I'll give everybody 45 or 60 seconds to do that. All right, we'll close in about 10 seconds. Okay. All right. Yeah, this is pretty cool. This is the first time I've done this. So, yeah, we see a lot intermediate, a few advanced. We'll hear from Geeta a little bit later, who's pretty far in their journey in exploring these technologies, and a number of foundational. And so we will cover some foundational concepts as well in this presentation. So when we talk about generative AI, what we really want to know in terms of the software development process is this technology valuable for me? How happy are my developers using it? And what is it that, can we use this technology right now? So to answer the first question around the impact of generative AI in software development, McKinsey & Company did a study to try to measure that impact. And they looked at a number of different types of industries and where the generative AI can have an impact, both in a pure dollar amount as well as a percentage of an organizational spend. And what you can see, if you look at the chart, we have two buckets of software engineering way up in the upper right-hand corner. So large amount of impact in terms of dollar spend, and large amount of impact in terms of percentage of overall organizational spend. So in the upper right, we see software engineering for corporate IT. This is internal applications that you might be building to improve efficiency in logistics, your HR, or your legal processes. Software engineering for product development, however, are the applications that you yourself would build for your customers. And so we see a huge amount of impact, potential impact of generative AI technologies in both of those areas. The second question that I mentioned is how happy are developers using this technology? And to answer that question, we also turned to McKinsey, who did a study this year on that particular subject. And you can look at this slide, but what I'd like to draw your attention to is the middle part of this slide. I was able to focus on satisfying and meaningful work. And we see a huge improvement when you're using generative AI. The reason for that is the generative AI can really take away a lot of the undifferentiated heavy lifting of software development. If we imagine for a moment a developer that needs to do something simple like parse an integer, that's actually not so simple. They may have been working in 5 different microservices that day, each one of them with a different programming language and a different standard library, each one of which are doing something different to parse that integer. If, for instance, the text doesn't parse correctly to an integer, maybe a null value is returned, or maybe an exception is thrown, or maybe there's another mechanism to determine that. The standard libraries are going to name the function calls differently, and they may have different parameters. One language may take a radix, and another one may assume that we're looking at the decimal in a decimal format. So there's a number of different nuances, all of which require memorization of all the different standard libraries that they might be using. Whereas if they're using generative AI, they just say, hey, I intend to parse an integer here, and I'm going to need to handle errors. And the generative AI can produce that code, leaving them to work on the actual business processes. So the third question that I want to address is this technology ready today? We see a lot of generative AI in the last 18 months or so. And so, is this stuff really ready for use now? It's still a pretty new technology. Gartner helped us answer that question. And they went out and did a study to determine when generative AI is useful to us in software engineering. And what you can see is that right now, this is something that we can apply to the core DevSecOps portion of the software engineering landscape. So at this point, I'd like to kind of go back, and we had that polling question. There were a number of people that are just getting started in the journey. So with generative AI and foundational models all being talked about a lot in the last 18 months, let's talk a little bit about what that is versus what we've been talking about for several years in terms of machine learning. When you look at a traditional machine learning model, you want to take labeled data. You have a use case in mind. So you take that labeled data and you train it, and you'll end up producing a machine learning model. When you're happy with the performance of that model, it's really dialed into exactly the use case that you're looking for. At that point, you'll deploy the model and let the machine learning inference take over in your production system. So everything that I've talked about is specific to a task. So if I want to extract text from images, like Amazon TextJack does, I would build the machine learning model based on that particular use case, and then I would have a system that extracts the text from images. But I'm not going to ask that system to then turn around and become a chatbot or ask questions about AWS. I'm going to only use that system specifically for the task it was intended. Foundational models, on the other hand, are a single very large model that can then be reused for multiple different use cases. In this case, I would use a single foundational model to generate text or to summarize things that have already been written or become a chatbot. So that foundational model can adapt to various use cases. If I have specific needs that are unique to my organization or my customers' use cases, I can fine-tune that model by tweaking some parameters in the foundational model itself, or I can provide more context to the foundational model and let it retrieve data from that context as it's answering questions. And that's a process that we call retrieval augmented generation, or RAG. So we can use a combination of both traditional ML models and foundational models to be able to accelerate the software engineering journey. And we have a number of different services that some have been around for a while, others announced just this week, to address software engineering within using both traditional machine learning and foundational models. So DevOps Guru is a service that you can use to help achieve higher availability for your service in production. It looks at the live running of your application, and then it will provide you with availability information. CodeGuru Profiler also looks at your live running application, but it is focused on optimization. So it'll give you optimization recommendations. CodeGuru Security will look at your actual source code and then tell you when you may have security issues in that source code so that you can then go and remediate that. CodeGuru Reviewer uses machine learning to provide specific recommendations for your code as though you have a senior developer sitting next to you doing a code review. And then this year, we announced Amazon CodeWhisperer in general availability around April. CodeWhisperer is your AI-based coding assistant. It lives right alongside you as you work in your IDE, JetBrains and VS Code. It exists within the AWS extension for those products, and it will allow you to say things like I talked about before, where I want to parse an integer today, and it will provide you with a function to be able to do just that. Works in many different languages. 2 weeks ago, we announced PartyRock, where you can go to today. PartyRock.aws is the URL, and sign in with any social media login. But when you go to PartyRock, this is a playground. It works well for prototyping. It works well for experimentation and as well as education. It's kind of a fun and intuitive UI system to be able to do that. It actually comes from a tool that we built for our own engineers to be able to learn about creating generative AI-based applications. So with PartyRock, you'll describe the application that you want to build that's using generative AI. And it will then provide you with context. Here's a foundational model to use. This is the type of prompt to use. And then you can add widgets or modify things, change the foundational model. If you don't want to use Claude, you'd rather use Titan foundational models. Titan is Amazon's foundational model. Claude and Claude V2 come from Anthropic, and all of them are available within PartyRock for your use. Amazon Q was just released this week, and we're going to see some demos today. And I'll remind you again at the end, but there is a session tomorrow morning at 10:30 in Caesars Forum to go more in depth in all things Amazon Q by one of our senior principal engineers, Claire Ligori. So Amazon Q is your AWS assistant that can follow you throughout your journey. So within the AWS console, you can be asking questions around what types of designs you might want for your application, what type of EC2 instances to use. But then you can also use it within your IDE with CodeWhisperer, along with CodeWhisperer, to actually say, hey, I need a new module, or I want to refactor this code, or translate this code from Java 8 to Java 17. Amazon Q is available in many forms to be able to do many things, and it's designed to be your assistant throughout your AWS journey. So we talked a lot about different point solutions, but when we think about generative AI and the software development process, what we're interested in is focused not just on the task of writing code. A lot of times when we talk about generative AI and software engineering, we imagine a developer sitting there typing out code, but we really want to think holistically about the software development lifecycle. So from idea to pull request to operating that code in production and to working with the users, we want to have generative AI along with us throughout the way to make that a more efficient, enjoyable experience for everybody. When Geeta comes up and talks about Finra, she'll share Finra's specific example of how they thought about generative AI throughout all of these stages in the SDLC. I mentioned CodeWhisperer and some of the things specific to software development, but some other use cases might be better filled by using Amazon Bedrock or SageMaker for specific use cases using machine learning technology. But the point is that we want to improve the pace of innovation. We want to be able to provide more consistency in terms of our engineering resources, and we want to make them more efficient. As I mentioned, we saw the McKinsey study that showed developers are happier using these technologies, which will also feed into talent acquisition and retention for your organization. So I'll pause here again, and we're going to do another poll. We've got 3 total. The second one is really around how you'd like to use generative AI. Is it to build generative AI applications or to use generative AI within the software development process, or perhaps it's both? All right, maybe we'll give another 10 seconds here. A lot of both. All right, a lot of both. Good, so it sounds like Party Rock was on point to talk about, and we'll definitely talk about Q in terms of developer productivity. So we'll talk a little bit about both of those. But when we talk about generative AI in general and how AWS can help, I wanted to show kind of the stack that we think about in terms of various AWS services that can help. So clearly we have some of the developer-specific tools, but if you are building applications using generative AI, you're going to want to be familiar with all the stages of the stack. So at the very bottom, obviously AWS provides a lot of base infrastructure building blocks for you. So AWS Trainium, a specific CPU that is designed for training machine learning models, and AWS Inferentia. So once those models are in production, being able to provide efficient recommendations based on the machine learning model. You need to have base compute, so EC2 with GPU instances. If you were in the keynote earlier this week, where we talked about the partnership with NVIDIA, you'll know that we're bringing the latest NVIDIA GPUs into EC2, working side by side with NVIDIA. And then we also have, you need to have your data someplace, right? So we have all kinds of data services available, S3, DynamoDB, DocumentDB, Neptune was talked about during Swami's keynote. So a number of different ways to tailor storage directly for AI and ML needs. Ideally, though, we'd be looking up the stack, and we wouldn't have to worry as much about the infrastructure because we can worry more about our business problem. And so we have a number of services that are developed around machine learning technology for specific use cases. So I've got a number of them here listed. I'm not going to go through all of them, but we did talk about Textract. We're going to come back to Textract a little bit in one of the demos that we have. But we have other things like recognition for objects and images and video, Amazon Comprehend and Comprehend Medical, Translate, those types of things. So if they match your use case, absolutely go use them. If they don't match your use case and you want a specific machine learning model for that use case, that's when you turn to SageMaker. And SageMaker has a number of different services within the SageMaker umbrella that can help you quickly create and maintain machine learning models. And then the newest on the block is Amazon Bedrock that will allow you, that focuses on the use of foundational models and provides you access to foundational models in a consistent way so that you can build your generative AI applications. And then we get into the developer tools. And many of these I already covered, so I won't cover them again. But Amazon Code Guru, the tools and SDKs to allow you to operate or work with AWS services. Amazon Code Catalyst, which we'll see a demo of in a few minutes, which is our unified development service that has issues, source code management, workflows to be able to deploy applications. And then CodeWhisperer, PartyRock, and Q that I've covered. But I've been talking a lot, and I'm sure a lot of people are excited to see some demos. So at this point, I'd like to bring Adnan Bilwani up to show you some of these things in action. Adnan?
Awesome. Hey, thank you, Emil. So as Emil was speaking about Amazon Q, the interactive assistant that we have, let's look at a few examples of how Q can really help us as we walk through the SDLC itself. We'll start with a console experience, right? So whether you're ideating on a new application or you're just exploring new services in your sandbox accounts, or just trying to figure out how to add new features into your existing applications, right? Q is your interactive assistant in the console and to act as your guide. So let's take a look real quick. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about. Let's see if we can go ahead and add a new, talk about or ideate on adding a new application here, right? So let's start by asking Q, hey, I'd love to build a new application. I want to build an application where users can basically upload PDF documents to extract all the data and make it searchable, right? I'd love to do that. I'd also want to keep my costs low as possible. I'd be able to, but at the same time, make sure that I can control all the traffic spikes as well, right? And I expect to have like thousands of requests per second at its peak. Last but not least, hey, can I do event-driven architecture as well? So we feed all the data to the assistant that's available in the console. It takes a view to figure out what to do. And it comes back and says, hey, you can, and introduces me basically to Amazon Textract and says, hey, you could use that to extract all your metadata from the PDF documents. It scales very well. It takes thousands of documents. Once you're done extracting it, you can store the data in Amazon DynamoDB. And then, hey, you want to have users upload that data? Let's create an API using Amazon API Gateway. You can use Lambda on the back end and basically call Textract from there. Sounds like a good idea. What else does it give me? Well, it gives me some additional details as well. It says, hey, if you're going to store those PDF documents, you can potentially do it with Amazon S3. And once your app is up, right, you can actually use CloudWatch and monitor stuff. Good start. Let me ask it some more information, right? Great, I'm downloading and extracting PDF data. What if I wanted to do more than that, right? What if I wanted to process document types like Word documents, for example? So I can continue having this conversation with Q and give it that input, and it comes back and says, hey, you know what? You can use the same architecture you have. I'm going to give you the list of formats that's available with Textract, give you some details there, gives me some additional details around Word documents as well. And then it tells me I can extract what kind of data I can extract, and then some size limit restrictions as well that I should be aware of as I'm ideating on creating that new application as well. So all in all, right, the idea is Q is a great assistant to have to kind of ideate with in the console as you go through. Now, that's great, but you've got the great console experience, but it doesn't stop there, right? Most of us developers are in the IDE, not in the console, and that's where we spend most of our time. Well, how does it work in the console itself? Well, as part of the IDE, you see Q as part of the experience there as well, where you can ask it similar questions that I did in the console. But not only that, you can actually ask it to explain code to you as well, and provide details. So let's take an example. I'm onboarding onto a new team. I've got they're working on this digital wallet application that I started looking at. And it's a digital wallet, which basically means it's got wallets, stores different currencies. I can move them back and forth. Great. I'm onboarding onto the team, and they're getting assigned issues, right? So I'm in my ID. How do I sort of, make or help Q or get assistance from Q to be more productive? So I can go in. I'm opening up my project. I'm going to go, hey, let me go ahead and select my code that I've got. Now, I could go into the next cube and ask my buddy what's going on, but I could also ask Q to explain that selected code to me. I'll go ahead and take a minute, and then come back and say, hey, look, I get it. It looks like it's a Python file. You've got a class in here that looks like it basically is responsible for doing DynamoDB CRUD operations at the moment in time. And then it actually goes ahead and point by point explains me what all the functions are. So it kind of talks about the constructor, the initializer, then talks about the getItem API, right? And then the list transactions wallet functions as well. Talks about basically how it takes a wallet ID, right, or a transaction ID and kind of queries the DynamoDB and gets the data going. So as you can see, right, Amazon Q is really helping me accelerate my individual developer productivity and going. And hey, right now it's explaining code. What's coming very soon is it's actually going to be providing code for you as well in the IDE and helping you sort of make that happen as well. So really excited to look for that. Okay, so wonderful. We've ideated in a console. We've gone ahead and leveraged it in the IDE, but what about our pipeline, right? What can we do about development capabilities being offered within the pipeline itself? And that's where Amazon Q comes into play within Amazon Code Catalyst, our unified development experience as well. So with Amazon Q, developers can pretty much assign an issue in Code Catalyst. You can provide it details of what you would like it to do. It takes a look at your repository. It figures out sort of what your repository is made of. It goes ahead and then figures out an approach in order to fulfill your request of what it does, convert it to code, and then get it ready for a pull request itself. So in this case, for example, let's use that digital wallet application that the team has been working on. And I want to add a new function that will implement, getting new transactions by a wallet, right? So that's what I'm asking it to do. So basically, I'm in the Code Catalyst platform. I go into issues. I go ahead and click on create issues. I'm going to start by creating a title and say, hey, you know what? I'd love to implement a feature to list all transactions for a given wallet. I'm going to go ahead and give it some details. I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to give you a wallet ID. Go ahead and list me all the transactions associated with that particular wallet. I'm also wanting to give me some unit tests as we go through Azure. And then let me give you some more details, right? I actually really want this as a Lambda function, which basically is taking data from an API gateway event. It's querying the DynamoDB. And then at that point in time, can you go ahead and please return me a JSON for all the data that you've received as well? So we go ahead and do that. We assign this to Q and go ahead and create the issue as we go forward. And by the way, the reason I recorded this is because it takes about 20, 25 minutes for this to go through. So I know you don't want to sit here for that. But it goes ahead, and the first thing it does is it looks at the code, right? Provides me a background of what it saw in the code. So it says, hey, I get it. Python's ADK stack. You've got Lambda functions, basically, for creating and updating all the wallets and processing withdrawals. I see you've got some model space in there, and it looks like you're using DynamoDB to do all that. Once it's done with that, it then provides me an approach of what it's going to do or how it's going to actually do what I'm asking it to do. So it says I'm going to create a new Lambda function. I'm going to import the proper files. And I'm going to go ahead and create the file that you need to basically do the transactions, and also going to create a file for the unit testing as well, right? So it goes and gives me the detail. If I agree with that, I'm going to say, Greg, go ahead and do that. It'll go ahead. 20 minutes later, magic abracadabra, it basically comes up with a pull request that I can then review and see what it's done. So first of all, it comes up with a file. It has actually set up that Lambda handler for me. Go ahead and put the details in. And in addition to that, it's also done that unit test file I'd requested as well. So think about it, right? From a perspective of where it's at, if it's gotten you there, let's say not even 100%, you can go ahead and make the changes you need in the pull request, right? Make sure you can update it to what you need it to be. But even if it gets you there 60% or 70% of the way, right? It's done a lot of that undifferentiated heavy lifting that you're looking to get help with as well. Awesome. All right, so I hope the demos were exciting and gave you an idea of some of the possibilities that Amazon Q can do for you as you think about expanding or accelerating your developer productivity as well. I leave you with one of the exciting features that I actually think is kind of really exciting, but I'll be honest, with all the announcements this week, I didn't get a chance to really play with this a whole lot, but I am looking forward to doing that post-reInvent. It is the Amazon Q code transformation capability. So starting with Java, this is available within your CodeWhisperer experience, within your IDE, and you can basically go ahead and upgrade your old Java code, let's say Java 7 or 8 to Java 17, with just a few clicks utilizing Amazon Q. We've also got .NET, by the way, coming very soon, so you can actually take your .NET framework and convert it to cross-platform .NET as well, so you can actually port your code from Windows to Linux with a lot more ease as well. So really looking forward to this and playing with this actually next week for myself as well. Okay, so as Gen AI changes and how we think about software development life cycles, right, it'd be really interesting to sort of know where you are with your Gen AI journey. You know, we kind of have talked about it a lot. Would be really cool to sort of understand where you guys stand. Or at least have everybody kind of understand where everyone sort of stands, right, and what the deal is. So we'd love for you guys to take a few seconds to see if you guys can fill out that poll as well. I like this live polling thing, by the way. It's kind of cool. All right, we'll give you guys, say, 10 more seconds. Awesome. So I think that almost 50% of, you know, hey, we're actively researching Gen AI, but aren't sure about operationalizing it exactly yet, is sort of a bucket that I think I feel that most people fit in. And I think that makes sense, right? So I think I'm hoping this reInvent and some of the stuff that we're showing you hopefully helps you sort of get to the point of where to operationalize it. And I know Emil will talk in the end about sort of some of the things that you should look to when you are actually going through that process as well. Awesome. Well, you know, we've talked about sort of a lot about what AWS has done, what AWS's offerings are, what we think things are going, and how generative AI and that developer productivity is being affected as well. But it would be awesome to basically hear this from an actual real customer as to how they are actually exploring this. That's why I'm really, really glad to have Geeta from Finra here on the stage to talk about how Finra is exploring generative AI in software engineering. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone, and good afternoon. I'm very happy to be here with you all in this breakout session. In today's presentation, I'm going to be sharing how Finra is approaching advancing developer productivity, or R&D explorations of leveraging generative AI technology within software development lifecycle, and our evaluations of AWS services such as CodeWhisperer. I'm Geeta Ramachandran, Senior Director at Finra Technology, leading application engineering and data science platforms. I'd like to give a little intro about Finra. Finra stands for Financial Industry Regulatory Authority. We regulate the US brokerage industry and the stock markets. Our mission is to protect investors and promote market integrity. We detect the wrongdoings in the US markets, bring disciplinary actions against them for their unethical behavior, and deter any misconduct actions by enforcing rules. Let's see Finra in numbers. Finra is named as the best mid-sized companies to work in IT for the 10th time. As part of our regulatory operations, we analyze and oversee activities of 620,000 broker-dealers at 3,200 securities firms. We collect and surveil almost 99% of equities and options market transactions. We collect, ingest, process, and analyze this volume of data at scale to detect insider trading, fraud, and market manipulation on a day-to-day basis. That's a lot of data to process. So Finra processes up to 662 billion market events per day. Let me repeat, that's a per day number. That's the volume and scale we operate with. As we continue our presentation, I'd like to walk you through our journey of software development lifecycle at Finra, a journey that is marked by continuous improvement and innovation. Our journey began in 2007 with significant investments in automation, such as integrated version control, test automation, embracing CI/CD platforms, setting the stage for a more responsive development environment. Fast forward to 2013, we embraced on a significant shift, which is starting the move to cloud. We implemented infrastructure as code, built our CI/CD strategies, and started defining what DevOps meant for us, which was pivotal in our journey towards operational excellence. In 2016, we witnessed a full-scale DevOps transformation. We built self-service tools for onboarding and provisioning, established DevOps experts for advocacy and best practices. This transformation was about empowering teams, streamlining processes, and fostering a more collaborative environment. In 2019, our journey took us deeper into more cloud-native architectures, such as containers and serverless. We also trained our technology teams to be cloud and DevOps aware. In 2021, we entered the realm of advanced analytics. Data science became an enabler for our enterprise. We built tools and platforms for advanced analytics using machine learning solutions that we saw earlier. We defined policy and procedures for governing AI and machine learning solutions, thus beginning our SDLC journey to a more dynamic SDLC and MDLC for models that is insights-led and data-driven. Now at 2023, we are standing at the forefront of another technological frontier, which is generative AI. We are currently exploring this technology to leverage within product development, operations, and delivery of applications. Building on our journey of embracing generative AI and new technologies, I'd like to talk about the goals of our project, which is generative AI in SDLC. This is a research and development project within Finra's R&D initiative. Our first goal is to investigate how large language models treat software code as input and a software code base as its context. We have all seen how these models work with a natural language form of input from a chat interface. So this exploration is for us to understand how these models interpret, generate, and optimize code. Our second goal is to experiment with these large language models to fine-tune and align them with our domain-specific code and artifacts and integration within delivery tooling. By tailoring these models to our domain-specific needs, we can enhance their effectiveness within our specific development environment. The third goal is to identify opportunities and use cases within the software development process, where our teams can focus more on creative and complex aspects of software development and reduce the repetitive tasks, the time spent on those tasks. As we innovate, we remain vigilant about the risk controls, such as data privacy, legal standards, and security compliance, and identify new risks that may emerge from the use of this technology and potential mitigating controls that we should consider. Our final goal is to assess the current state of the industry in software development tooling that leverages generative AI. By doing so, this will help us understand where the industry is heading and also benchmark our experiments against industry practices and standards. Having established the goals of our project, let's look at what are the anticipated outcomes and the value we expect to derive. First is enhanced productivity with faster development cycles and an improved overall developer experience. This means providing our teams with tools that will make their work more efficient, but particularly more enjoyable, leading to higher productivity and innovation. Second is improved software quality and reliability. Our hypothesis is that this technology can help teams to build the solutions and systems that are fundamentally more reliable and stable. This will translate to lower maintenance costs and increased customer satisfaction. And finally, with a highly productive team and a good quality product, one can react and respond to changes more quickly and capitalize on emerging opportunities. So let's look at what are some of the generative AI use cases within the software development lifecycle, where this technology can be applied, catering to the specific user personas across these stages. And these are the use cases that we identified as part of our R&D project as the use cases for us to evaluate. First, this can help in generating user stories and analyzing functional specifications and product review documents for consistency and comprehensiveness, aiding a complete support for product managers. Next, during design, these models can help in generating design and architecture artifacts, analyzing the artifacts for coherence in the design and enabling rapid prototyping. Then in design, help in generating context-aware optimized code and generating boilerplate code and unit test code. During code review, these models can analyze the code for issues and ensure compliance for coding standards that are set at the organization level. This step can be particularly helpful for architects, developers, testers, and security engineers to help them maintain a high-quality, secure, optimized code throughout the development process. This can be a useful tool for QA engineers, where it can help in generating integration test code, test plans, and test data. And this can streamline their testing processes and ensure enough thorough test coverage. In operations, this can assist in analyzing errors in production and even generating business requirements by analyzing operational events that occur in production, which will be a useful, valuable add-on to DevOps and SRE professionals for proactive system monitoring and continuous improvement. So that is, in a nutshell, all the use cases that we have identified as part of this project to evaluate. Now, given these use cases across different stages of the software development lifecycle, let's look at what is the intersection of AWS services that can meet these use cases, and also the user personas who can gain efficiency by leveraging these AWS services. These are the AWS services that we identified to leverage across these SDLC stages that we hope to evaluate as part of our R&D project. First is Amazon Bedrock to analyze functional specifications. The models in Bedrock are very suitable to analyze documents such as PRDs and user stories and functional specifications for consistency and comprehensiveness. Also use LLM agents that is available in Bedrock to automate commonly performed tasks using a domain-specific knowledge base. CodeWhisperer can be used across design, development, code review, and testing stages. And Code Guru for analyzing code during code review process, and DevOps Guru for analyzing operational events and errors in production. Having said that, as part of our project, we are currently evaluating CodeWhisperer for development and testing use cases. So I'd like to focus more on and speak to what our evaluation's progress is. So as you know, CodeWhisperer provides foundation models, like what Adnan shared. These foundation models can be used by users as a coding companion. Now, as we are thinking about leveraging these large language models for our coding process, we have to be considering and mindful of what controls these models have from a responsible AI perspective. So let's talk some about those. The foundation models are trained on open source data set, open source repositories that have acceptable and permissible open source licenses, which is very important from a license compliance standpoint. And these models provide reference tracking when they generate piece of code that looks exactly the same as what is available in an open source repository. for visibility and tracking so that the teams can add attributions or eliminate those suggestions based on their organization's policy. Secondly, these models have built-in bias avoidance so that they do not generate inherent biased coding structures. And finally, the foundation models are trained on repositories and they are scanned for security vulnerabilities. Now, in addition to that, the developers can also run security scans right in their IDE using CodeWhisperer. So as they get generations and suggestions from the CodeWhisperer service, and if they are augmenting that with their additional code, they have the ability to run security scans right before they commit. So this is an added security layer apart from other security controls that we would typically have in a DevSecOps pipeline, such as static analysis, dynamic analysis, and software composition analysis. So we've talked enough about the foundation models. Let's talk about the CodeWhisperer's customization workflow. So as I said, one of our project's goal was to fine-tune a foundation model to our domain-specific code and artifacts and customize it to improve the effectiveness of those models. So CodeWhisperer's customization capability is available in preview, and we participated in that preview program late summer this year. So I'd like to talk about what that approach looked like and how we went about designing and architecting the customization workflow. This is a two-part process. So the first step is to create customization, and this is usually performed by a CodeWhisperer administrator called CodeWhisperer admin role. So this is an IAM role that has specific permissions in an AWS account to create customizations for CodeWhisperer. This CodeWhisperer admin provides a training set or a set of packages for code repositories from an internal package store that the team would identify that they would like to customize on, and provide that to a KMS encrypted S3 bucket. So this bucket is within Finra's AWS account that is encrypted using our customer managed KMS key and kicks off the CodeWhisperer's customization process. This customization process will run, and the service will assign an eval score on the customized model. Based on the evaluation score, the CodeWhisperer admin can then assign users and groups to have access to this model to further evaluate. So the second step is when a developer or tester tries to connect to this customized model using CodeWhisperer, using their development environment, usually a local IDE, using AWS Toolkit plugin. The first step here is an authorization step. The service first authorizes the users via AWS Identity Center, which is running in a Finra's Identity Center account. The goal here is to make sure that the users have the right set of entitlements and approved access to access the customized model. Now, once the authorization is complete, the developers can access the customized model and continue with their development process. Now, note here that in this setup, the Identity Center is a key authorization piece that needs to be set up in our Finra's AWS organization first and managed by an IDC administrator. Some of the security controls that we were able to achieve with this design and approach is data encryption. The data that we used to customize the model is fully encrypted within our S3 bucket. And the access to these models are authorized via our own federated identity provider, which the AWS Identity Center communicates with. And most importantly, both the data and model did not leave Finra's AWS environment, and both of them were within Finra's VPCs. We are also opted out of data sharing, both on the service side and on the client side. What does this mean is the data that we use to train or customize the foundation model does not get used by the CodeWhisperer service to train the foundation models, right? So this is used only within our own customization process. So we have seen enough about our CodeWhisperer customization workflow. So let's see a quick demo of CodeWhisperer in action. We are going to see 3 use cases: code completion using AWS SDK, code completion using a domain-specific SDK, and code completion for unit tests. Now, for the purposes of this demo, I have used Finra's open source repositories. You are going to see terms like gatekeeper and Fidelius throughout the demo, and you can check them out in Finra OS GitHub project page. Okay, let's get started. So we'll see the first use case in action, CodeWhisperer using AWS SDK. I have got Gatekeeper in my IDE, and I'm connected to CodeWhisperer through Identity Center. And I have a customized model here. So for the purpose of this use case, I'm going to open a class called RDS Lookup Service. And this class has methods to interact with RDS service, and the two methods that we see here to interact with Aurora RDS cluster, global cluster already. So I'm starting to write a comment that says method that takes Aurora RDS cluster, global cluster as input, and returns its reader cluster as output. And when I hit enter, CodeWhisperer should be able to provide suggestions. So let's see. Okay, it has suggested a method signature that seems to be right with inputs and output. And it has also generated the logic for the code, which seems to be right. So we'll go ahead and accept that and proceed with testing further. The second use case is code completion for domain-specific SDK. So this is using a Finra-specific credential management SDK called Fidelius. So we are asking to write a method to return credential from Fidelius by passing a set of inputs. All right? So it has generated a get credential method and has a suggestion to use Fidelius client. But the second suggestion is even better, which is more having robust error handling. So we'll go ahead and accept that. So that's the demo for the second use case. Now the third use case is code completion for unit tests. So we have a class here and a method called put credential. So we'll try to write a unit test for this put credential method. And I'm opening another class file, which is a test class file, starting to write my test annotation, and we'll start writing the unit test method here, which is put credential without component. Okay? And once I finish writing my method signature, CodeWhisperer has generated the code for unit testing that method. It has set the properties, did not set the component, and it has 3 suggestions. Let's look at the second suggestion, which is setting a blank component. And the third suggestion is setting a null component. So all of them are valid use cases, but we'll accept the first test case because that was our intent, and we'll go ahead and run the unit test. Unit test passed. So in this test case, we have seen how CodeWhisperer is able to understand its context, where the main method that we were trying to unit test on was on a different file, and we were trying to write the unit test on a test class file, and it was able to understand the properties that the method took and also mocked the service and written the assert statements. What is more interesting is that it was able to identify the edge cases that we typically would have tested for, right? Not setting the property, setting a blank property, and setting a null property. So one can easily generate these type of test cases with an assistant like CodeWhisperer. Now, in terms of next steps for our project, we would like to complete the tool evaluations for the range of models and tools, including the AWS services, along with open source models and vendor tools. Our goal is to assess effectiveness, integration capabilities, and the potential impact on developer experience and productivity. Following the evaluations, we'll propose a specific set of next steps for usage and impact measurement. So in conclusion, today we have journeyed through our evolving landscape of software engineering, from the strides we have made in SDLC to the latest explorations of R&D. I hope this was insightful for you and your teams, and thank you for your time. Back to you.
Thanks, Geeta. It was great to hear from Finra and actually, hearing from a customer the journey that they're taking, as most of you are, in terms of trying to understand these technologies and how they apply to the SDLC. I just wanted to quickly come up and summarize some of the things that we think are important in terms of adoption. That CodeWhisperer customization, by the way, is currently available in preview. So we hope to get it out in general availability soon, but it's already fairly useful, at least at Finra. So that's great to hear. In terms of your generative AI journey, the biggest takeaway that I would say is experiment, right? Learn. There's a lot of new services. There's a lot of new innovations coming out every day, and so in this space. And so it's really important to kind of experiment. And simultaneously, with your experimentation, establish your KPIs, define specific success metrics for what's important to you, and then use that in terms of developing an enablement plan for your organizations. It's certainly fairly easy for a developer to go up and install the AWS toolkit and see CodeWhisperer, but there can sometimes be tips and tricks in terms of how to structure your comments or maybe your function signatures to provide the best information for CodeWhisperer to use that. So these types of things can really help accelerate your journey. I did want to quickly remind folks of DOP212 for a deep dive into Amazon Q. That's tomorrow at 10:30 in Caesars Forum. And all three of us will be in the back of the room. I know they want the room cleared, but we'll also be happy to take questions in the hallway as long as there's people interested in that. So with that, thank you very much. Please fill out the session surveys. We do look at the results. We do read all the verbatims, the text that you put in saying